Thanks a lot, guys. My name is Puey. I'm co-founder of Airbitz, and we are a tech startup in San Diego. We're focused 100% in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Our big push is to really bring Bitcoin to the masses, make it really easy to use, make it functional, make it familiar. Many of you might have heard of Bitcoin. I'm going to assume a handful of you maybe haven't or aren't as familiar with it, so I'll touch on it really briefly. So what exactly is Bitcoin? To a lot of people, it's digital money. It definitely is that. It's a digital currency. It's a great digital store of assets. And very importantly, it's a digital payment network. And unlike any other payment network we've had before, it requires no banks and it requires no government. In November of 2013, somebody had sent over $150 million worth of Bitcoin from one account to another account. It took about 2 seconds and it cost nothing in transaction fees. So that alone should give you an idea of the disruptive potential of Bitcoin to both international and domestic payment networks. So now you know how great it is. What's the issue? So the problem, Bitcoin is hard to use. Very importantly, it's hard to secure. It's unfamiliar. It's pretty intimidating for the non-technical people, and it can be pretty frustrating, especially if you lose your Bitcoin. That's our goal. Airbitz will finally make Bitcoin easy. We'll make it easy for you to use your Bitcoin by finding places that accept it. And then we're going to make it easy for you to spend it using our integrated Bitcoin wallet on mobile devices. So starting off with the business directory. Our business directory is launched today. It's on the web. Unlike other business directories in the Bitcoin ecosystem, it's hand curated. We have full-time people scraping the web, scraping the business directories to make sure we have accurate, quality listings, great photos, a lot of information, everything you see listed here. Photos, hours of operation, website URL, social media links, and whatnot. In addition to on the web, we have our mobile devices supported as well, iOS and Android, to give it a nice, crisp, simple, clean interface. Powerful search engine, search you by GPS or in city, state, country that you happen to want to be in or want to search. Single tap to directions, just like a Yelp application would give you. And we're proud to say that we were actually nominated one of the top, actually voted top 3 mobile apps for Bitcoin in the 2014 Blockchain Awards. And those were just announced a couple weeks ago. We didn't win #1, but we were happy to be nominated. We've only been out for about 2 months versus the winning app, which has been around for a couple of years. So we're pretty young to the ecosystem, but have got decent traction. Our wallet, we're still working on our wallet. Expect it to be out in a couple of months, 2 or 3 months. And this is where I think we really shine. Trying to make it familiar, make it beautiful, make it easy to use. Ease of security and ease of safety. These are 2 things that I point out to a lot of people that a lot of wallets fail to do. Ease of security meaning make it familiar, a login, a password is all you need. And that it actually implements local client-side encryption of your funds on the device. We're a strong advocate of financial privacy, and the way our wallet is implemented is such that we as a company have no control over people's funds. We can't send them, we can't receive them on behalf of our users. And more importantly, we have no access to their information as well. We don't know who's using our application. We don't know what those transactions are doing. We have no control over that. Everything is client-side, locally encrypted, and then backed up on our servers. Very different from the traditional financial network. One big advantage of that is we're not a financial services company. We don't have to deal with that level of regulation. We're simply a software provider. In addition, our model mirrors Bitcoin in that we're decentralized in a lot of our infrastructure. Our servers are decentralized, meaning that you can't take out 1, 2, or 3 of our servers and inhibit our users from being able to send and receive their funds. We're finding that being both a business directory and a wallet creates a really great symbiotic product mix. A lot of great partnership opportunities come out from this. We partner with current Bitcoin exchanges and ATMs, and they can suggest Airbitz as the default wallet, and we are one of the wallets. Mobile virtual network operators, these are resellers of wireless minutes. We've had some approach us and actually say they'd like to pre-install our wallet on their phones before shipping them out to customers. And then also merchants, really small businesses can utilize our wallet as a simple point of sale system. And all of that we can do in exchange for featured listings on our business directory. So that ends up being a full, nice, complete circle in our business model. Monetization, we're looking at charging a 0.1% outgoing transaction fee. And if you look at the transaction volume on Bitcoin, just the actual volume, not the dollar amount or Bitcoin amount, it's growing about exponentially every couple of years. And we're expecting to hit probably 1 million transactions per day by 2017. Visa's transaction volume, in that respect, that's about 0.5% of Visa's transaction volume. And if Airbitz could achieve 0.5% with an average of about 4 cents per transaction, we're looking at revenue of about $40,000 per day. And that's not enormous, but it definitely is a lot for a startup. And in closing, the payment ecosystem, the entire business of payments is about a $6 to $10 trillion industry. We're pretty convinced that Airbitz can really be the catalyst in pushing Bitcoin to take a significant portion of that market share, especially if we can bring it into the masses. That's it. Thanks a lot, folks. Any questions?
So how do you differ from PayPal? I imagine you're mobile-centric.
So we are definitely mobile-centric. Mobile is your most secure device. Far less malware has occurred on mobile than there has been on any desktop platform. So we're focused on mobile. PayPal has a mobile wallet. They've also got access on the web. Differentiating factor is that it's Bitcoin, number one, and that you don't need a centralized authority, and you don't need PayPal. There's no one person, government entity that can determine whether or not you can receive funds, whether you can send funds. And like I said earlier in the presentation, you can send those funds anywhere in the world. Bitcoin accounts don't exist in a location. There is no specific place where they're at. They exist in all places that have access to the internet and at all times. It's a huge differentiating factor for PayPal. And PayPal is known to restrict people from receiving funds that were sent to them, specifically even nonprofits, for political reasons. Nonprofits that may or may not be on the fringe of the moral judgment of state governments or other entities. So those restrictions are not there with Bitcoin.
You said you back up to your servers. It's client-based, but it's backed up to your servers?
Correct.
So there's no government that can subpoena your records?
They can subpoena records all they want. We'll happily give that to them. Good luck trying to get into the data.
It's encrypted?
They're encrypted. They're encrypted entirely by client information, not our information.
Okay.
So login and passwords would encrypt the data.
So the person would have to be subpoenaed, essentially?
The person they'd have to know, they would have to know the person that they would want to subpoena.
Oh, got it.
Correct.
So let's fast forward 20 years, and you know, municipalities and governments are run from taxes based on capital gains and all, and you know the story. And if we end up with a system where it's untraceable, what's to just stop all the major corporations from using Bitcoin to basically run you know, offshore savings accounts instead of being accountable to the countries that they live in? So, you know, if we end up with an untraceable system, basically 10% of the U.S. government or 10% of the U.S. GDP is 1.7 trillion is government spending. So how does, and those are often for social programs. So I'm really concerned that, you know, if you end up with a trackless system, then you end up with no revenues in municipalities, and you end up with a collapse of the social structure.
How the government chooses to actually collect these taxes, once again, this becomes a very, very philosophical point of view that may be outside the scope of us talking about our startup. But the way the government chooses to collect their taxes could eventually just change. There are people that I've talked to in the space that have suggested the government simply tax things like property, something that you can't hide. And if our taxes simply are generated from those specific, very traceable resources, then that can still operate and still generate enough revenue for that country. Now that's a very projecting kind of a statement. I'm not a financial or economist expert, but there are other ways for governments to collect their taxes. And I'm not even suggesting that just because you have financial privacy, that you avoid paying taxes. This isn't a tool to avoid paying taxes. This is a tool for your own financial privacy.
Well, it depends who you are.
Exactly, and there are people that will use it for nefarious purposes, but they can also use cash. And it's currently cash is used orders and orders of magnitude much larger than Bitcoin is. And Bitcoin, although increases your financial privacy over using, say, a credit card, it's nothing compared to cash, and actually it's not untraceable. So you may think it's untraceable, but it's not anonymous.
Yeah. So what's to stop Square or PayPal to entering the Bitcoin space? And isn't that, and then if you could also talk about how you get to 0.5% of Visa's total sales.
So what's stopping them from entering the space? Not a whole lot. They absolutely can enter the space if they would like. I think it would be great if they entered the space. There's a use for people that want to have their money in a centralized source and don't mind the inhibitions of a Visa and MasterCard. That's a very small percentage of the entire worldwide population. Us living here in the US are in a bubble where we think Visa and MasterCard are accepted everywhere. Where if you wanted to sell a product internationally, globally, something like Stress Away, and you only took Visa, MasterCard, or traditional digital payment networks, you'd be eliminating over half of the entire world population, because much of the world is restricted from the Visa, MasterCard, PayPal network for political reasons that you may or may not agree with. So they can incorporate Bitcoin. It doesn't mean that somebody can still use Visa, MasterCard the way they could use Bitcoin. And then, sorry, you had a second question, which was?
Just, I mean, I saw the $40,000 a day
Yeah.
revenue, if you're able to reach 1/2 of 1%
Right.
of Visa's total sales.
Right.
And I was just wondering how you get from here to there. What
So
that plan
as
looks
far as
like.
like what's our business model, like how do we plan
Yeah.
to branch out? Our first target audience are early adopters, especially the early adopters that are the advocates of Bitcoin. And we're meeting quite a few of those people, the people that run meetup groups, the people that are at the conferences, and the people that are introducing new users to Bitcoin. And I'm one of those people. The reason why I started Airbitz is because as one of those people, I found a lot of the pain points in introducing people to Bitcoin. And once I introduced it to them, what their pain points were. So we're targeting those people. And once you've achieved all of those enthusiasts who are now recommending your product, it's what I believe snowball from there. And the growth in Bitcoin from both a price point of view, a transaction point of view, and a value point of view has been pretty much exponential every single year. So achieving 0.5% I don't think is unreasonable at all, especially since that's only 0.5% of Visa, not including all the other payment networks across all other countries. And this is the one payment network that's 100% international. Yeah.
Your branding suggests that it's only related to Bitcoin. Are you looking at involving other cryptocurrencies, and how does that work with your branding? I think that's the right term, but if I'm
No,
not.
that's great. That's, we are looking at incorporating other cryptocurrencies. I didn't want to talk about them in the scope of this audience. If we're talking to a Bitcoin audience, I might mention something along those lines. Many people aren't even aware of there being other cryptocurrencies. But at least to answer your question without trying to dive into answering the question of their existence, yes, we're looking at adding other cryptocurrencies as the need arises and as the technology eases for us to add it to the wallet.
But, I mean, does that conflict with, I mean, you have the Bitcoin symbol in your logo and it's Airbitz.
Yeah.
It seems like, you're all in on that.
I don't think it conflicts entirely. I mean, Bitcoin becomes almost the initial brand. I'm convinced that it will have long-lasting brand recognition. And the people that are getting into the alternative cryptocurrencies will still accept that, heck, at least I've got a great wallet that I can use.
So Bitcoin is like the generic term for
It
this.
almost becomes like the generic term to Kleenex or the Colgate to tissue or toothpaste. Yes, that's how I personally feel, and other people have mentioned that as well.
I just want to say, I think you have a great marketing opportunity, not just to spread the word about Bitcoin, but to educate. Obviously, the first questions people have are not even really related to your product.
Right.
And I know you've gone and talked to people in the area and been part of meetups, but I think, and I don't know if you've been thinking about that, but there are knowledge-based marketing opportunities for you, and I hope you've been thinking about that. It's difficult to find more reliable information on Bitcoin. So have you thought about the type of more media-oriented opportunities you can have, as in educating others and being a resource? I know it's way off from your product, but it would benefit you, I think.
Actually, I don't think it's way off from our product. And actually, this is the first, maybe second time that I've presented on Airbitz primarily. Most of the time that I've done presentations have been 90% on Bitcoin, and maybe 10% about what the company's doing. And we're finding we have to educate the public first before we're going to be accepted in the mass market. And I feel like if we're presenting to a Bitcoin-specific group, then yeah, we can educate them on Airbitz. But this is kind of the challenge that we face, especially talking to a demographic like you guys that isn't 100% in Bitcoin, that we still have to educate people on it. So no question about it. I love talking to different groups. I just came from a talk at Mensa this past weekend and educated them on Bitcoin, answered a ton of questions. And even though I have a company, we have a company that's focused on building this business directory and wallet, a lot of my time is actually spent not dealing with Airbitz, but just educating the public and doing stuff Bitcoin related, and I'm happy to give other presentations more specific to Bitcoin education to any other groups. If you guys have groups that you think would be interested in a more thorough discussion about Bitcoin, I can easily give a 30, 40-minute presentation on that, targeted to beginners in the basics of Bitcoin.
Just how easily can you distill that communication? I mean, is that something that you can get somebody comfortable in 30 seconds, or does it take 20 minutes?
It depends on their level of technical understanding. So I could probably get most people to at least understand the core concepts of Bitcoin, even if they're not technical, in about a 30-minute conversation.
Okay.
It depends on how deep they want to go, but the average person, probably in about 30 minutes, I can get the base concepts of where does it come from, how do you transfer it, what does the actual transaction look like, what's the ecosystem look like, how do you buy it, sell it, how do you obtain it, things along those lines. Now, if they wanted to get into some of the more deeper aspects of the protocol, it's programmability. We're talking a little bit further than that. And then they would also need to have some level of technical understanding.
So I saw downtown Johnny Brown's, which is right across the street. I saw their logo up there, or a picture of their sign. So they obviously take Bitcoin. I don't own Bitcoin, I don't have your app. If I want to walk over there and use your app and use Bitcoin tonight to buy a beer, what do I have to do? So to get me as a user today, what do you have to do?
If you want to use our app to find downtown Johnny Brown, if by some chance you didn't have it, or you didn't know where it was.
No, I'm saying, and I'm being
Actually,
honest, I don't own Bitcoin, I don't have your app. So what do you need to do to get me to be your customer?
First, you got to kind of come over and do a few hundred hours of development for us because the app's not done.
Got it. No, that's good.
Great. Yeah, so the app is not done. So it's in development 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
One thing we don't do is we don't enable the buying and selling of Bitcoin through our app. We're a wallet. We store your Bitcoin. Our goal is that Bitcoin will become the currency of the future. We don't need to deal with fiat currency. However, we know that it's important for there to be rails into and out of the ecosystem. And there's other companies focused on that. They're highly regulated. 50 or more percentage of their entire budget is focused on the regulatory environment. It's lawyers, regulators, you name it. We don't want to deal with that. We'd love to use our money for developing great products. However, they are great partnership opportunities for us. Like I mentioned, currency exchanges. So those are the type of businesses we want to partner with to be able to enable the buying and selling of Bitcoin through their API. And it's a release 2, release 3 kind of thing for us. Probably wouldn't come out in the first release.
So can I just ask a quick follow-up? So let's assume that the app is done and I've now purchased the Bitcoin from an exchange or from you, however, and now I go to downtown Johnny Brown. How does that transaction happen? What do they have to have on their end, and what do I have to have on my end in order for me to end up with their product in my hand?
So what the transaction typically looks like, if they happen to have integrated POS, a POS that integrates Bitcoin, we classically show a QR code which embeds an address for you to send money to and an amount to send money to. Using your phone, you'd scan the QR code, enter your PIN, and out the money goes. It's pretty much that simple. That's it. Now, different technologies coming up to make that a little more friendly. QR codes can be a little bit hard to scan, especially if it's dark and there's glare and whatnot. So we and many other companies are looking at using NFC and Bluetooth Low Energy to make that kind of a wireless transmission versus it being a QR code scan. But right now, the default de facto standard is QR codes. I think there was a hand here.
Yeah, I'm one of those beginners who don't know anything about this, and the question that's coming to me is, it sounds like it has a definite purpose to serve.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't Bitcoin produce an app to be able to make that functional for their customers, or enhance their system to make it more user-friendly, easier to use, and so on?
Bitcoin is doing it. We are. So Bitcoin isn't a company. It's a technology. It's like the internet. It's like asking, why doesn't the internet create a browser? Because we're doing it. So Bitcoin's a protocol. It's open source software, and people can implement other open source software that implements that protocol. So we are Bitcoin. That's it that way.
Yeah, I just downloaded your app, like a really nice app, and I see that some places offer a discount.
Absolutely. We highlight those places that offer a discount.
Do you think that's gonna be a common thing, since like if I use my Visa, it's gonna be, 3% for the shop? Do you think they're gonna offer 3%? Do you think they're gonna offer more? Do you think they're gonna offer less?
I think they will offer discounts. They definitely wouldn't charge you more for Bitcoin. I think I didn't go into, which is part of the protocols, the fact that receiving Bitcoin is always free. You're never charged to receive Bitcoin. If you go through a payment processor, like a Visa, MasterCard, but in the Bitcoin space, they might charge you a percent to convert it into US dollars, or for their services as a payment processor. Now, a lot of these merchants are passing forward that savings. The savings from A, not getting a transaction fee, B, not getting any chargebacks, because you can't get a chargeback with Bitcoin, and passing off to the consumer. There's two merchants in the Hillcrest Farmers Market. They're offering 10 and 15% off if you pay with Bitcoin. Part of that's what they're saving. Part of that's because they want Bitcoin and they want to advance the ecosystem. But yes, they will be.
Listening to what you're saying, what you said in your presentation, it seems like there's a big international usage of Bitcoins. Can you tell like which countries are the biggest users of Bitcoins? And then secondly, what mechanisms are you using to reach those people, or would you use to reach those people?
Great question. So how do we reach the international market? One of the markets that's really growing quickly is Argentina. So they're experiencing massive inflation, like 30% inflation a year. And they're finding that they would rather buy cars to hold their value than hold it in their native currency, Argentinian peso. So they're happy to buy Bitcoin. It's still not mass adopted over there, but it is probably the best option. And when there's been so far just one conference, one Bitcoin specific conference in Argentina, and there's about a dozen of them a year, or even more than a dozen of these Bitcoin conferences worldwide. That conference sold out. It was standing room only at every single talk. That shows how much interest there is in specifically developing countries. And I do believe that developing countries will probably be the first to mass adopt Bitcoin. Because unlike the US, where we live in this bubble, like, yeah, credit cards accepted everywhere, the banks are relatively okay, like, our money's not too much at risk in the bank. And most of all, as bad as our inflation is, it's still the premier example of okay inflation in the world. Other countries are actually in need of it. So I do think it's going to be adopted quickly in other countries. Argentina is a great example. How we plan to target it is actually our business directory helps a lot. We have people coming from countries like Brazil coming to us saying, we love the business directory. We'd love to be that person in our country that puts in these listings into your directory. When are you going to launch in our country? And so just by having the best product out there, we're seeing people come to us. And we definitely want to support these other countries. It is a bit of a challenge, the language barrier, and implementing that into our technology is a bit of a challenge, but we want to support them. And we have no qualms about being very international. We know that the US is only our starting ground.
So you talk about risk. Since you live the Bitcoin space every day, the price has gone down 50% in the last 6 months. So how do you get, the transaction fees are lower, but how do you get people to buy into the Bitcoin? That it's going to be the currency of the future when you have such huge fluctuations in price.
Right.
In the last 6 months.
Yeah, volatility is huge. The thing that a lot of people that are looking at the volatility today fail to do is look at the volatility in the past. So the volatility, as bad as it looks today, is actually leveling off compared to the past. As more people enter the Bitcoin ecosystem and there's more liquidity in the markets, that volatility slowly winds down. And with the exception of a 20-25% ramp up that we had in the past week, upward ramp up, we've actually been fairly stable for the past month or two. Kind of gold-ish stable, not dollar-ish stable. Right? But how you get people into it is the fact that, well, yeah, it's volatile, but it's volatile upward rather than being stable downward. So take your pick and introduce your own level of risk tolerance. How much do you want to have in Bitcoin? How much do you want to have in fiat currency? I'm not saying have it all, although there are people that are 100% in crypto. There's time for one last question.
So last question.
The problem that happened to Mt. Gox just a few months ago that actually caused, how do you ensure the safety and security? I mean, you are not an exchange center, obviously. How many exchange centers exist already, and are they reliable to double that somebody can get the solution and all that?
So exchange services, his question was about Mt. Gox. Many of you may have heard about the news of this exchange service in Japan, which was hacked. A lot of Bitcoins lost, stolen, who knows. And what do we do, or what are our thoughts on that type of ecosystem? So our take is those are centralized services. Those are the equivalent of banks. And people don't realize this. Mt. Gox may have made huge headlines in the news. Banks lose 10 times that amount of money monthly, and they never make the headlines. Why? Because they're insured. Well, what are they insured by? your own inflation. So you're paying for it. You're paying the 2 to 5% a year in inflation to insure those banks. With Mt. Gox, the people that actually left their money in Mt. Gox are the people that suffered. And there were years worth of signs that this was not a place to put your money. It was all over the forums, all over the news that this company was not run well. And so they were an exchange, and I tell people they're an on-ramp. Right? These centralized institutions are ways to get Bitcoin or sell your Bitcoin. But don't leave your money there. And everyone I know that had left money there and lost it all say the same thing. It was my fault. I knew there were signs, and I could have pulled the money out. I was lazy. I didn't think it would happen. That's kind of the free market at play. I wasn't affected. I didn't make any money there. I was affected indirectly by the drop in Bitcoin price, but that was temporary. And it's back up to the level that it was before Mt. Gox had gone down. Now, what are we doing to prevent that type of breach? We're not centralized. Right? When you are a centralized holder of Bitcoin, you become a honeypot or a piñata. Right? Everyone's swinging at the piñata because once someone cracks it open, there's a ton of Bitcoin to be gained. For us, it's your phone, your device, your tablet that holds your money. And A, good luck trying to find where the large amount of value is in all of that. And then B, trying to actually get into that device. So it's really a game of, it's a bit of a cat and mouse game, and also making it harder in time and value for someone to get into the money versus what's in there, or what they feel like they can guarantee is in that device or that location. And if you make that hard enough, it's just not worth it. And there'll be other targets, such as these exchanges, that people will want to have versus your individual wallet where they don't even know how much money. All right, thanks a lot, folks.
Wanted to present one of these cups to all guys, and you're welcome to apply to the different 1 million cups network throughout the country. I think they're coming up with a password or a passport program where you get it stamped by the different cities, but I think they're up to 33 cities now, so they're growing pretty quick, and should have 100 by the end of the year, somewhere in that area. So stay afterwards and ask questions. Feel free to network. Please invite people. Please try to be here before 9 so you have a little time to network, so the first presenter gets a full audience as well. And we really appreciate your being here. Hope to see you next week. Okay, thank you.